I'm Stephan Kesting, this is Rob Bernacki, and one question we both get a lot is how to develop a technique. How to develop a technique to the point where you can use it instinctively, effectively, where it just comes out of nowhere and actually gets applied. So we just put our heads together. We both have answers to this, but we came up with a grand unified theory of the 5 things you can do in order, more or less, to come up with it. So the first is obviously to learn the technique.
Yeah. As far as learning the technique goes, I'm obviously a big fan of giving people a conceptual grounding. Sure. So, if I just teach you a move and I tell you to memorize the steps of the move, I don't think you've really learned it. I only think that you've really learned the technique if you understand the conceptual basis behind it, if you understand the context. Context is kind of everything, because no move in jiu-jitsu just works. There's always a context to how, unless you're doing it against beginners, you just don't know it.
Sure. Well, in a very abbreviated version, why don't you teach me a move?
Sure.
You get 1 minute to conceptually.
So I'm going to use the Mantis guard because we just put out this no-gi de la Riva that included Mantis. So the Mantis guard is a clamp-based guard, right? Clamp is this sort of thing, as opposed to
This doesn't count towards your minute.
Yeah, a clamp-based guard as opposed to a hook or frame-based guard. So I've got a clamp-based guard which I'll enable with a hook. My goal is to access this lever and internally rotate your knee, and this will happen as a result of a kazushi, where I'm able to shift your base and now pinch my knees together. So my initial goal is to get your knee rotated inward, and as I continue to access this ratchet stop lever, I can sweep you or take your back in the process, based on whether or not you post your hand. So the context is I'm playing an open guard. The response that I'll be getting is going to be either someone choosing to fall over because they've been off balance, or posting their hand. If they post their hand, I'm going to take their back.
And within that move, there are now a certain number of steps.
Steps, exactly.
Right? You've given the big picture.
Yeah.
So what are the steps, just so people can follow along?
So step 1 is to actually establish the guard. Right. So this might happen because I'm playing de la Riva and choose to move into it, or I might just pull directly to it. Step 2 is to create a kazushi movement, which shifts my partner's center of gravity.
So you're kicking my leg away.
So I'm kicking this leg out while turning your knee in. Step 3 is to make sure that I maintain control of this lever while sliding my shins together to control the direct lever to your hip. As I start rotating, and there you go. Step 4 is to continue the off-balancing process. I can now switch my hand, grab your hip, extend you out, scoot back, secure the seatbelt, and tackle back.
Oh, so we powered through that, but there might be a few more steps, a few more details, a few more concepts, but just for brevity.
Yeah.
That's step 1. That's learning the technique. The same would apply to armbar from the guard.
Yeah.
Double leg takedown from the 2-on-1, whatever.
Anything we do, we'll have, as long as we can put it in context so you understand kind of when and why to attack it, rather than just because I want to.
Sure.
Then you've learned the technique.
Okay. So now the next step we decided on was repetition.
Yeah.
That's not a natural motion for most people to do.
Definitely not.
So how many times should people repeat to grab a partner and with almost no resistance, unless the technique requires resistance,
of course,
rep it out? 2 times, 10 times, 10,000 times?
That's a very difficult question to answer precisely. It's certainly way more than 2 or 10 or 100. As to how many hundreds, I think that depends on, frankly, your level of athleticism, whatever genetic gifts you have. Some people can, I've seen people hit techniques that they've repped probably 50 times. Yeah. Those are in the extreme minority.
Eric Paulson once finished a fight in Shudo with an armbar against Turtle that he learned right before the fight and repped it out on the mats a few times. I'm guessing 10 times?
Yeah.
But he's got this massive body of knowledge.
So that's what I'm saying. If we're just adding to something you already know, how many times did he rep the getting to turtle part? How many times did he rep the armbar finish part? Sure. So he's really just adding a really small sliver of the technique. But as far as a full technique like this will take a few hundred reps, anywhere up to a few thousand, I'd say.
Yeah, depending on how skilled you are.
Yes.
And how much familiar. Maybe you know the Mantis position.
In which case, there's a lot less work.
Okay. Yeah. Then the third step is
situational sparring. We have a proprietary type of situational sparring that we call FYJJ, just stands for some things, that allows people to take the sort of the winning and losing out of the equation, and allows you to really explore attacking the position in a way where the consequence of failure isn't so high that it makes you apprehensive.
So how would we apply your jiu-jitsu, FYJJ
yes.
to this position?
So I would simply start in the Mantis guard, and the restriction on you would be that you're not trying to pass the guard, and that you're not trying to necessarily disable the guard. But what you are trying to do is just keep your balance. So if my Kuzushi fails, if I'm not doing it right, I get the immediate feedback that I need to work a little bit more on shifting you around, and there we go. Now, one of the things that will occasionally sort of fail here is the straightening of your leg will prevent the knee buckle that I wanted. So that'll kind of lead us into the next step. Sure, we'll table for a second. But alternately, I'll have to like make an adjustment and then keep trying to switch into something that makes the technique work. So you're not falling over, you're not letting me do the move, but the nature of your resistance is limited so that I can explore where the gaps are in my understanding.
So if we were exploring side mount escapes, my constraint might be I'm on top of your side mount, I'm not trying to crush you, I'm not trying to choke you, I'm not trying to unlock you, but I'm also not giving you the escape.
Exactly, yeah.
So the cost of failure becomes less for you.
Yeah, and the nature of these drills is that they're modular so that you can increase your level of difficulty just by having your partner increase their level of informed resistance.
Okay. So some kind of limited drilling.
Yes.
And could be FYJJ.
Yep.
Which stands for what again?
Fuck your jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now as we go on, so that's step 3. Step 4 is the I call it the but phase.
Yeah.
Like
but. Yeah, so now what we want to do is learn what are the most common and realistic objections that your partner is going to bring to the table. So in the case of the Mantis guard, the first one is what I mentioned earlier, which is the Kuzushi problem, which is right now your base is relatively narrow, but what that means is I'm also too close to you to really move you around. So I have to kind of change how I apply my Kuzushi. I've got to get a little bit more diverse in the Kuzushi.
So you applied a different technique or a different adaptation to off balance.
Exactly. And then the second common problem, which is what we kind of discussed earlier, is you choosing to keep that leg straight and me not being able to internally rotate and buckle your knee. So now I'll move into a variation that we call the reverse knee buckle, which can move you to the other side. So basically you're shutting off one avenue of attack, but by committing, I don't want to say overcommitting because it's still the correct thing to do, but by committing to one area of defense, you're generally leaving another one open. Like it's very hard to defend all options. So like that's kind of what any successful attack is based on, is I attack one thing, you defend that one thing, I attack another thing, maybe you defend that, I attack a third thing, or go back to the first one.
So the boxing analogy might be here, getting really good at my cross, but then you learn to slip.
Yeah.
Oh, darn, what do I do now? And
Yeah.
then learning, well, if you slip,
You're going to
I
do
can
the next
hook, I
punch.
can uppercut, I can,
Yeah.
I can go in clinch, I can do something.
Yeah, and I think a really important thing to mention, like at this stage where we go like but is how realistic are we being with the objection? Because if the objection is just
I'm going to Boston crab everything. You have to have an answer to the Boston crab against every technique.
To get good at a technique, first of all, we have like a filter for techniques anyway, because I think there's a decent amount of stuff that gets taught it's largely bullshit. It doesn't work on good people. And so like assuming that you at least have that filter, now you can kind of narrow down like if the response is simply because you knew that the attack was coming. Like if I'm only practicing 2 options on you and you know exactly what they are, and I'm using like effectively precognition to defeat your attacks, that's not realistic, right? We have to put it in the context of I'm going to be doing normal shit to you, and you're going to not necessarily know that I'm going to launch this attack at this exact time, because that we'll get into like the rabbit hole of arguing with idiots who are like, yeah, but if you did this, I would do that. Yeah, but if you did this, I would do. Oh, yeah.
You mean my life in the self-defense world?
Yeah, exactly. So provided we just know that we're teaching legit stuff that works, at the advanced level, at the black belt level, then...
So that's the filter.
Yeah, for me, yeah. Like that's the filter I use at my academy. I promise my students from day one, I'm teaching you to beat black belts. I don't really care what works on white or blue belts. And that doesn't mean that, we're teaching a bunch of fancy crap, because really at the black belt level, it's mostly a lot of fundamental stuff that tends to work. But it's also understanding the context, and I don't know, beating that point to death, but if you don't understand the concept and the context behind something, then you've got a non-functional technique. So a technique that we would consider really high percentage, like the arm bar or the triangle choke, can become a non-functional technique in how it's taught and how it's learned and how it's drilled. So
the 5th step is sparring.
Yes.
And this is a point that I often beat to death. When you start out with a technique in sparring, you're going to introduce a choke from the rear mount.
Sure.
or an escape from turtle.
Yeah.
You're not going to go and try it out on the biggest, heaviest, most skilled black belt in your club because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Unless you're the next biggest, heaviest black belt.
For sure.
When I start with a new technique, I start with old, smaller than me, white belts.
Yeah.
And if I can get it to work on them, then I ramp it up. I think if I've got a technique that I'm pretty sure is going to shut down your butterfly guard,
Yeah.
I'd be an idiot to go and try it on you right away.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it poorly, you're going to see it coming, and then it's wasted. I should go and train it with everybody else, sharpen it there, and then maybe it'll work against you.
Yeah, it's the term that I use, it's like a ramp. You're not going to try to start at the top of the ramp, right? You've got to start with the bottom. So the amount of times I've gotten this question similar to you, which is like, Rob, I'm a white belt. I'm trying to pass that purple belt's guard. It's not working. Well, duh, it's not supposed to work.
It's not working because jiu-jitsu is working.
Yeah, exactly. It's not working because a guy who's trained 5 times longer than you is better than you at it. No kidding, right? Can you start to do it against another white belt that's around your size? Cool. Then eventually you'll become a blue belt. Can you do it? That's the progression. So, and it's the same for me, right? Like I don't start, even when it's something that's fairly like innocuous. Like I'm just adding like the Eric Paulson example. Like I'm just adding a sliver into an existing thing. I still don't start it against my brown belts. I start it against my white belts and work my way up.
Yeah. So then eventually we've integrated the technique into sparring, and you go on and work the next technique in.
And by attempting it in sparring against, like once you get to the top of the ramp, you're going to have successes and failures, and I would say it can become like a bit of a recursive loop, where now it's okay, well this didn't work for that reason, so I'm going to go back to basically like learning and drilling the response to whatever just happened, and then I'm going to wrap it a bit, and then I'm going to fucking jiu-jitsu it, and then I'm going to, so yeah, you can kind of keep going with this.
Perfect. No, it's a very concrete example of how it's a continuous learning curve.
There you go.